are these people?
This is from the Grayzone. Jeremy Loffredo, which sounds like a delicious pasta dish, is talking about how U.S. Africa Leaders Summit promises more exploitation for Africa, record profits for U.S. mining firms. Now, we've talked about this summit a few times now, and there's been quite a bit of revelation there. So let me... So the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit held this December in Washington, D.C., provided a platform for the Biden to advance its agenda across the African continent, with topics ranging from COVID-19 to climate change to closing the digital divide to strengthening democracy. Washington's agenda united around the belief that African collaboration with U.S. multinational corporations would prove mutually beneficial and advance long-term progress. The weekend of discussions was conducted Davos style, with heads of U.S. industry seated directly beside African heads of state, and members of the Biden administration. At the top of the corporate titans' agenda was the relaxation of regulatory requirements, which they argued would make the continent more inviting for outside investment. So on one set of regulations that the U.S. would especially like to loosen are those related to the mining sector.
Of course.
I wonder why. This includes miners' rights, child labor laws, and slavery laws. Why would they ever need that to be loosened? Environmental regulations and mineral tariffs. So, is that Deloitte? Deloitte, a U.S. corporate giant and strategic partner of the WEF, published a paper in 2018, The Future of Mining in Africa. Links to this article down in the description below, where you can find the link to that. Which spells out the agenda Washington is advancing across the continent. The paper argued that facilitating the digital transformation known as the Fourth Industrial Revolution would require African nations to loosen mining regulations intended to protect human rights and the environment. The paper lamented that the mining sector continues to experience scrutiny to regulators in Africa, which supposedly creates uncertainty, delayed investment in mining expansion, and stops the development of new mines. Deloitte went on to argue that Africa needs to move away from enforcing regulatory compliance for compliance sake and move toward delivering value. It was clearly implied that the value would be determined by corporate America and not necessarily the African people. Give me my minerals. Give them to me. The script put forward by Deloitte helped set the stage for the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit this December. There, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken presented a memorandum of understanding to DRC Foreign Minister Christophe Lutundula. Jesus, butchered that. And Zambian Foreign Minister Stanley Kakubo. The agreement, according to Blinken, opened the door for U.S. and like-minded investment in the respective countries' vast green mineral wealth, referring to massive deposits of nickel, cobalt, and copper. And what's that last one, Collin? Starts with an L.
Copper.
L. There's one more. We're talking about lithium. 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 We've talked about was it?
Yeah, we talked about it.
Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe. Ban the exports.
That's on our stream with JB.
Yep.
Look at it.
Go check those clips out. So there's Anthony Blinken right there with Felix. Jesus, you try that one.
Tshisekedi.
Tshisekedi? Tshisekedi.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Tshisekedi. Yeah.
Can y'all put like pronunciation? Anyway, the DRC produces more than 70% of the world's cobalt, Zambia is the world's sixth largest copper producer, second largest cobalt producer in Africa, Blinken said. Global demand for critical minerals is going to skyrocket over the next decade. Electric vehicles help reduce carbon emissions, and they support the global response to the climate crisis. The Secretary of State continued, draping the plundering of Africa's wealth in friendly green speak.
Yeah. And how many of those Africans will be able to afford those cars?
Like, I'm gonna go with like one of these, like one of those.
Right.
You
How
know,
many of them, or if they can, it will be like 5 times the price of what we would pay here. Well, to them, it would be 5 times the price, given that
so
relatively not making as much money as here in the
yeah.
West. But yeah.
I mean, how many of us are going to be able to afford any of those electric vehicles? It's definitely a
Right.
for them, not for us problem. So, Siddhartha Kara, an academic and author of 4 widely praised books exposing the business of human trafficking and slavery in Africa, has spent several years in rural Congo documenting the most hideous and largely hidden abuses of U.S. multinational supply chains and mining operations. Kara remarked to the Grayzone that the agreements hashed out at the U.S. Africa Summit will mean more demand for minerals used in EVs, leading to more exploitation, abuse, and misery for the women, children, and men who scrounge the world's cobalt out of the dirt in the DR Congo. So, Josh Goldman of the Bill Gates backed cobalt startup in the deal room. So, fun. Why do they call it the deal room? It's like, it's not Dragon's Den, people. Like, you know? So, the U.S. African Summit culminated with an event called The Deal Room, in which leaders of industry announced and celebrated successful agreements with African nations. Among the corporate executives to appear inside the deal room was Cobalt Metals' Josh Goldman, who you saw before. Cobalt Metals is a new tech mining company founded by Bill Gates and backed by Jeffy Bezos and Richard Branson. Could you get a more triumvirate of evil there? Could you like
Right.
what? The company relies on AI, okay, and advanced imaging systems to find and mine rare earth mineral deposits that other mining giants have missed.
Yeah. Let's develop the
Yay.
tech to rob Africans of their resources so that we'll be able to make even more money
While
for ourselves.
also making Terminator mining robots. Yes. Future is gonna be cool. Our job at Cobalt is to invent better ways to find the metals to electrify the world economy. Copper, cobalt, nickel, and lithium. We are working to discover the deposits that will become the next generation of mines and produce the materials that we need to avoid catastrophic climate change, Goldman said at the event. I'd like to add another. That's sand. Where are the sand mines at, Collin? Like Cameroon, Nigeria?
Yeah.
Like
Gold Coast.
So like all the glass and all the like also as part of this.
Yes.
So how many rare earth minerals does this Gates Bezos Branson company aim to mine and own? All of them, in fact. The Cobalt website candidly states that the company aims to secure control over, quote, all of the world's reserves of nickel, cobalt, lithium, and copper. All. Every bit of all. Give me all of it. So, yay.
This is why, and I have issues with China and Russia as well in Africa too. You know this, but
they're competing for this now.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So
yes, the resource is Africa, literally,
right,
and South America. That is the resource that they want to fight over.
Right, but you can also argue that China and Russia, well, more so China, is doing it in a more subtle way. You know, because where are they going to get those resources from in order to build the roads and everything that they want to help these African countries with? They need to do the same thing. And who is going to get the majority of the profit? It's not going to be Africa.
It's
Well,
not going to be
Africa
any
will
of us.
right. They're going to benefit, quote unquote, in terms of the infrastructure, sure.
It'll be people
But
like
who
Jeff
gets to make
Bezos who's going to get on a fucking rocket and leave.
right? So this kind of puts a new spin, not really new because we kind of talked about this. Like, Solomon said, hold on, I saw
there's going to be so much more war.
War. Yes, there's going to be.
Yeah.
We're fucked.
Well, Africa's fucked.
Yeah, all of us are fucked.
I mean, it's going to affect all of us are fucked, but like more especially Africa, you know, because, and this is kind of partially why I feel like the US is kind of tiptoeing around the idea of going to war with China via Taiwan. So it's going to bring Africa into the mix in all of this. And we've read that, Africa is going to, some countries are trying to remain neutral, or continue working with Russia and China. Given the resources that China is able to offer them, so essentially, like, this is going to be a huge blowout. And at the end of the day, Africa is going to get the most fucked over because either way, their resources are being either taken for use of themselves, which are not going to necessarily be regulated, or they're just going to be straight up stolen from the West. So, this is kind of and this is kind of why I kind of say I'm not like on this pro-China train. And this is why I say to people on the left to caution yourselves in regards to what you're saying in that, because either way, Africa is going to get screwed.
Yes.
Either way.
So look at this graph. Every time I look at it makes me laugh, in fact. But it's funny that they did the math for us. So this is cobalt metals, right? Here's their statement, right? And discover 12 trillion in new EV batteries require all this resources. We need all of it. All of these metals, plus another 12 trillion of new sources, right? That's what they're looking for. So they are hoping that Africa and South America includes 12 trillion US dollars of resources for us to take. But look at there's the mine supply. That's what recycling can get you in gray. And that's the supply gap that they're wanting to try and find. So, like, they do realize that, like, the Earth doesn't have this, like, graph shape on its resources.
Right.
They are finite.
Right.
So, yeah. Fun stuff. Anyway.
Yeah.
In the deal room, Cobalt's Goldman announced a new mining project in Zambia. I'm here to announce the largest investment yet in our company's history, an investment to own, develop, and explore. Zambia is a place where the laws support investing and where the government supports our investment with actions that are transparent and fair and fast. So according to the WEF, yes, to them, according to the World Economic Forum, by 2030, U.S. multinational corporations like Microsoft, Amazon, Tesla, and Google will require 17 times more rare earth minerals to power Western consumers' smart devices and electric cars for the coming green revolution.
Wait, pause. That just sounds like, go back for a second. That just sounds like an oxymoron. Like,
right? Yep.
Taking resources, natural resources, in the name of being green, like that makes no sense to me.
Nope. Right? Isn't that fun?
Yeah,
isn't that fun?
Well, that's their justification for it, but
look who else gets into it. Just in case you were worried they wouldn't, the U.S. Department of Defense explained that Africa has a plethora of strategic minerals describing those resources as critical to 21st century progress.
In other words, Africa.
Yes. Like, we need that shit.
That's right.
So,
and if you're not going to give it to us, we'll make you give it to us.
Because who's saying it? It's the Department of Defense. Like,
right. So again,
according to the New York Times, the latest line of electric vehicles rely on a host of minerals and metals, often not abundant in the oil-rich Middle East, which sustained the last energy era. Look how well it went for them.
Right.
These minerals are in other historical targets of rapacious colonialism, Africa. In Siddhartha Kara's view, the growing demand for green batteries is driving a scramble to extract vital metals out of the ground as quickly as possible. The mineral rush has left thousands of workers with no protections while toiling in subhuman conditions for a few dollars a day to feed vital battery minerals up the chain to consumer-facing tech and EV companies worth trillions. Here, Zambian activists and environmentalists protest pollution by the British-owned Vendetta Limited mining firm. Industry participants in the Davos, Switzerland-based World Economic Forum proudly embrace what they believe is a kinder, gentler economic model known as stakeholder capitalism. No longer will these corporate giants obey the will of shareholders at the expense of human rights and equity. Instead, they are collectively moving forward toward a seemingly progressive vision that sees all of humanity as a stakeholder and are working in its interest. The mentality of stakeholder capitalism is clearly reflected in the tech and electric vehicle industry public relations campaign around their supposedly sustainable supply chains. We should have a video in the playlist INN clips. If you look, it was a while ago where we talked about the World Economic Forum rebranding as the Center for Inclusive Capitalism, right? That's exactly what they're talking about here, right?
One question.
Yeah.
And I need some clarification on this, and people in the chat can clarify this for me. Greta Thunberg was at
that Davos,
forum,
yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah, she spoke. She talked about how millionaires were bad, you know, and then gave word salads.
Like, and I know, like, she's been getting, like, people are up in arms based, you know, with the interview that she did with who are they again?
Rebel News.
Rebel News, and her basically laughing, but like the fact that she was even there in context of this, is sus as fuck.
I mean, this is stuff I would ask them. I wouldn't ask them why. Like, they ask questions like, why is it cold here if global warming? It's like that kind of stuff is a little tired and sad, but like otherwise.
Right. Why isn't she calling this stuff out? That's the thing.
Yeah.
You know, like,
and if she does, it's mealy mouthed, like vague, you know, no specifics.
So yeah, it just makes me, and I'm sorry, and I'll say this right now. It just makes, not to say she should know everything, but the idea that this has been going on for decades.
Yep. So, and in 2019, class action, lawsuit filed on behalf of Congolese miners shatters the industry's rhetoric about ethical operations. The suit alleged that Alphabet, Apple, Dell, Microsoft, and Tesla are aiding and abetting the cruel and brutal use of young children to mine cobalt. However, the complex nature of the tech industry's raw mineral supply chains, which change hands dozens of times between a wide array of unofficial and official groups, has made it practically impossible to pinpoint the origin of cobalt minerals. It was this deliberate, opaque process that enabled the tech giants to dodge the Congolese miners' lawsuit. Apple, for its part, has released an official 20-page document promising that the company's supply chain has been certified ethical by a third-party supply chain investigator. So, this is that some of those protesters going against Vendetta there as part of that. So Carr, the researcher of slavery in the African mining industry, dismissed claims like those by Apple as little more than optics and marketing campaigns that rarely, if ever, touch the bottom of corporate supply chains. The assumption is, if we say we are ensuring dignity and sustainability all the way down our supply chains, people will believe us and business can carry on as usual. The truth is that there is a global subclass of humanity in appalling conditions at the bottom of our global economic order in the mining sector. So with the demands for materials for EV batteries set to increase by 87,000%, according to a 2020 study by Sussex University, the mining industry will be compelled to continually exploit new areas of the developing world and new populations to keep pace. And just as the U.S. waged regime change wars and conducted long-term military operations across the Middle East to secure control over the fossil fuel energy sources, Western consumers demanded similarly coercive tactics could supplement memorandum like the one the U.S. signed at its recent summit with Zambia and the DRC. What do you think, K-Bear?
I mean, I think I'm glad we kind of reported on Africa in particular, like gradually, over the last few months, like with different stories and just seeing how they're tied together in terms of the implications of what this means. I think on the world stage, I think more especially for Africa in terms of this is neocolonialism 101, but again, part 2, but then the idea of like the fact that these African leaders are there that are allowing for much of this exploitation to take place.
Yeah.
It's really something, so it's disgusting, but it's kind of phrased in a way of like, as I said, we want to be green and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, you're going to take resources from Africa. You're not offering them anything necessarily in return other than maybe like some money for whom, like for the elites in those countries. It's not even going to the people in these countries. And they're the ones who have to do the work of mining, all these minerals for our tech. So I just wish a lot more of these African leaders had a lot more backbone.
Yes.
Really. That speaks to their corruption, but shame on the West too, probably more so for wanting to kind of exploit them again. And then, as I said, China, look, you can say what you want about China. I don't care. They're not exactly clean in this either because they're still using those resources as well.
Yeah.
And they're getting profit for their country in order to do it as well. Yeah, the only difference is like they actually are giving them shit.
Yes.
In terms of infrastructure.
And they're not trying to dictate. They're not trying to dictate necessarily like what's happening as we are.
Right.
We're trying to dictate how we do it, how it's done,
But how much of that is but I have to wonder.
Is regulated.
And it's something with probably is regulated, and so like, but between China and the West, like, Africa is fucked up. And I think it just kind of makes what Akile said earlier in our interview with her even more vulnerable because most African people are not aware of this. No. They're not aware of like the
what's
issues
happening
that surround them.
Right.
Ultimately, like in terms of how the West is.
Well, and the West
like
purposefully
keeps
itself.
Generally are purposely fucking them over.
Well, and the West purposely keeps itself isolated from those like instances. And I will argue that like, yes, we should be sharing those resources with everyone. Having said that, it's not our resources to dictate where that goes, what to do with it, how it's spent, and if we're wanting to share, maybe we should ask nicely. May we please have, like